Welcome to another episode of Better Business, Better Life. I'm your host, Deborah Chantry-Taylor. I'm passionate about helping entrepreneurs and their leadership teams get what they want out of business and life. On the show, I invite successful business owners and expert speakers to share their successes. They are open and honest about the highs and lows of business and also life as a business owner. We want to share those learnings with you to inspire you, but also to help you avoid some of the common mistakes. My hope is that you take something from each of these short episodes that you can put into action to help you get what you want, not only out of your business, but also your life. So good morning and welcome to another episode of Better Business, Better Life. Today I'm joined by my colleague Mel Rowsell, who's a leadership coach and facilitator. Hi, Mel.
Hi.
And Mel is probably not a well-known thing about Mel, but she was actually the co-founder of Vend. And we met because she came to an event at the event centre I was running in Parnell through a mutual friend of ours, Declan, and we just hit it off. And we've been friends ever since, and we work together with clients as well. So welcome, Mel.
Yeah, thanks for having me along. Super stoked to be here.
Absolute pleasure. I'm really looking forward to hearing your story. So before we get started, I always ask my guests just to share a professional and a personal best so the viewers, listeners can get to know them a little bit better. So what would you say is your professional and personal best in your life so far?
Well, let me start with my personal best, and that would have to be my two delightful daughters, Holly and Summer. I think, as most mothers would attest to, there's nothing really better than having wonderful children in your life. So that would definitely have to be my personal best.
Yep.
And professional best, when you asked me that, oh my goodness, it was so difficult to try and answer. But I think with the coaching that I do, I can have the ability to really change people's lives, change people's mindsets about themselves. And I have seen such significant changes in people's lives as a result of the coaching that I do. And it's so incredibly gratifying to see that. So I would have to say that that's my professional best.
Fantastic. Now, you tend to work with founders and leaders of private organisations. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. Yep. So founders, because I know what it's like to be a founder. It's tricky. So I definitely can help founders and leaders. And everything that I do is all about the human connection. So not really strategic thinking or decision making or analysing your competitors in the market or anything like that, but all about mastering yourself and optimising that human connection and creating environments where people can thrive and achieve. That's my shtick.
Fantastic. And I guess, that came from your days at Vend, right? So most people probably don't know, but you are the co-founder of Vend along with Vaughan. Tell us a little bit about your story in terms of starting Vend with Vaughan and where it got to. Just share with us a little bit about the journey.
Yeah, well, it was really interesting. My journey with Vend really happens in 3 acts, if you like. The first act, the second act, and the third act. And the first act started actually on the bedroom floor of my daughter's room when we were living up in Kerry. And Vaughan said to me, Mel, I've got this idea to create this new thing for shops, point of sale, but we need to move back to Auckland. And we had a bit of a conversation, and within 15 minutes, it was decided that we were going to move back to Auckland. By the time we left Summer's room, that was that. We were moving back. And so then we relocated back to Auckland, and Vaughan disappeared down into the downstairs bedroom for about a year, coding away. Would run up the stairs with something to test, Mel, push the button. And I'd push the button, and all of a sudden, some kind of payment function would come up, and we would be all excited. And then, eventually, as any founder or entrepreneur will know, it's lovely to create something. It feels nice and, is exciting, but then you need to find customers and you need to find investors. And so started the long slog of doing that well and truly before we had any office space, before we had any other employees or anything like that. So the very early stage really was about me saying, yep, let's do it. And really allowing Vaughan to bet everything except for the family home because we had 2 young children and I wasn't going to put our house on the line. But we ate through our savings for a couple of years while, Vaughan was not earning any money, but coding this wonderful thing that would become Vend.
Yeah. So just interrupt for a second, Mel, out of interest, the conversation about the house, because that's quite a boundary, isn't it? Like, we will do this much, but we won't do that. Did you actually have that sort of conscious conversation about what those boundaries were? Yep.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And I was happy to support Vaughan in any way, shape or form, except I would not put the house on the line. that for me was the absolute no-go area, was that we were not going to do that. But in every other respect, that was absolutely, and I think anyone in a relationship like that will know, it really takes 2 people, especially when you've got children, because, someone's got to keep the home fires burning while the other person pours himself 100% into this burgeoning business.
Yep.
So, and then what happened was that we started to grow. Vend was investment, grow and by investment. And so what happens when you have an organization that gets, funding is that you tend to grow much quicker than if you're an organization that's bootstrapping or growing organically through profit. And so we grew very quickly and we needed a people and culture person. And I really didn't want to take on that role at all. I had become quite jaded by human resources, or even back in the day when it was called personnel.
Personnel. Oh, yeah, I remember those days.
Remember those days?
Yes.
But anyway, we couldn't find anyone. I was like, oh, okay, I'll do it, even though I really didn't want to do it. But actually, it was really fun because I could do whatever I wanted to do because I didn't have a traditional manager, or, I could just play and have like a little sandpit and do what I thought was right. So I really fell back in love with people and culture and was able to make things up and be my quirky self that I am, and do all of the things that I thought would be good to do, even though they weren't traditionally like best practice or what other people would do.
Yeah.
And alongside Vaughan, because that any founder of a business, like the culture of a business is really a representation of the founder or founders.
Yeah.
Especially in those early days when it's kind of organically growing. And then when you get to about 30 or 40 people, things tend to break a little bit because you get the influence of the founder is diluted. Mm-hmm. And so then you need some systems and some processes in order to keep going the things that you have built organically, which tend to be pretty good. Although because the culture is representative of the founder, that is all the good bits and also all the bad bits. Yeah. So the bits of yourself as a founder that you would rather, not think about, well, those bits will come out in your culture as well. So there tends to be like a little bit of fixing up, required a little bit of tweaking at about that 30 or 40 people mark. Yeah. So, yes. And, in this stage, Vend was growing very quickly, moving very fast. Lots of people had jobs with many, 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 many hats. So you would be trying to juggle multiple priorities in any one day or week or month. It's a typical startup where you just make it all up as you go along, using trying to get knowledge from as many places as you can.
Yeah.
But ultimately having to move so quickly that you just need to make very rapid decisions in order to try and stay ahead of the pack.
Mm-hmm.
And then, we were growing and growing up until about 250 people when I left the day-to-day operations, and growing overseas as well. So, having to overcome all of those tricky bits about opening up overseas offices, trying to keep a culture which was more or less the same but a little bit different. Trying to hire people overseas who would be really great culture add to the organization, and all the time with me trying to juggle that and being a wife, the main caregiver of the children, also trying to do Lincoln parent help at school and everything else. Very interesting dynamic times with a lot of learning. But what was interesting, and I think that's something that was, because for me it's impossible to tell the Vend story without telling my own personal story. And one of the things that was so interesting in that for me was just such a massive dose of the imposter syndrome, which I know a lot of people resonate with. A lot of people have had that experience. And so in this first act of me at Vend, my Vend story, the imposter syndrome was it's like a cloud over that whole time, which, was wondering like, well, should I be doing this? Am I the right person to be doing this? Am I just here because I'm sleeping with the boss? Would I get this job if I had applied for the job? And then trying to juggle these hats. So many hats at different times of people and culture person, your camp mother, as I was affectionately known, shareholder, owner of the business, wife, and this is another reason why I think for founders going on that journey, all founders have got multiple hats to wear, and
they're
learning
all reasonably
to wear
new hats, aren't they?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I mean, so Vaughan came from a programming or data background. You did actually come from a personnel or HR background.
Yeah.
So it wasn't like you hadn't done this before.
No. But I had come from quite a traditional. I'd been in healthcare, HR and healthcare before coming into startup tech. So it's quite different. Quite different. And so I had become quite jaded and had decided to leave HR when I got pregnant with my first daughter, first or second daughter, I think. And so because I just had grown not to like it, it had been very adversarial, and I used to call myself Robo-Mel because I have to go and, do all of these things I didn't really want to do. And I had this persona that I would put on to enable me to do that in that professional sense. And I didn't really enjoy it very much. But when I realized at Vend that it could be different, then I came to just thoroughly enjoy it. And because I actually wrote a book about my experiences.
Yeah. This
book here, Leadership for the Fourth Age. Ta-da!
Yeah, great.
And in it, I talk about some of the things that I think are important that I really did at Vend, which was it was all about empathy.
Yep.
Everything that I did and do is all about empathy and understanding other people and how they tick and what's up for them and how to communicate with them. And courage, because when you're in a fast-moving organization like that, you have to move quickly and you have to do things that scare you, whether that's hiring someone that's smarter than you or making a decision with insufficient information, what you deem as insufficient information, or going down a path that you just don't know where it's going to, you're making bets. You're constantly kind of making bets on things and being vulnerable. And I think this was one of the things with, the camp mother hat, was that there was a lot of vulnerability in that I projected to being really real, very, very real and authentic, which then encouraged other people to be real and authentic. And I really think that that's probably the key that created the wonderful, wonderful Vend culture, was that it was very real. It was all about humans. Not about anything else other than humans, and being very curious about your experience and about other people, and being consistent with the way that you turn up. often joke with my training, it's better to be a consistent asshole than an inconsistent one. Like, you'd be better to be an asshole every day of the week, rather than just turning up every now and again as a complete a-hole.
Yeah, it's confusing, right? It's no consistency.
That's right.
I want to explore a little bit the imposter syndrome. I mean, you recognize that you had it. How did you overcome that? And did you share that with people as well? Or because it is something we all experience, don't we?
Yes. Okay. Well, let me then wrap up the first act.
Yep, sure.
So this was the first act. Me, Vaughan and I starting Vend, growing it and doing, all of those bits and pieces. Act number one. So then act number two starts for me in my head during a week off in Cook's Beach. And a whole lot of stuff had happened. So Vaughan and I were in the process of separating. And we're great friends now. Us separating was the best thing for our now sort of expanded family. Yep. We were 4 and now I think we're about 8 in the expanded family. But nevertheless, at the time it was a little bit harder than now with sort of 6 years perspective. Yeah. So we were separating. The business had to go through a big restructure because sometimes / often in startups, you get your hiring wrong, and we hired in front of the curve, ahead of the curve, and we had to lay a whole lot of people off when the projected numbers didn't hit the forecast. Yeah. So that was going on. And because of all of those things that I was talking about, empathy and vulnerability and curiosity, RoboMel had gone by that stage. So real Mel had to turn up and do that, and that was very difficult, especially when we had recruited people onto this big why, like this big changing the world and the world of point of sale, and then having to turn around and let a whole lot of them go was pretty difficult. Yeah. So the marriage was ending. The business, which had been going so well, had a massive speed bump. My dad was diagnosed with cancer, and luckily he came through and was fine. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, because Vaughan and I were separating, I'd had decided that I couldn't stay working at Vend because that was Vaughan and Vend were synonymous. So I had to go and do something else. And so I decided to start the business that I'm doing now, which was very scary because Vaughan was the entrepreneurial one. I was always the very sensible, let's not bet the house, let's make to-do lists, and and so for me that was really, really scary, going out on my own, not knowing where I was going to get my next paycheck for, and having to go and earn my own crust. And so all of this happened, and what happened over about 6 months or 12 months is that I suddenly got in touch with this resilience and resourcefulness that I never knew I had. I used to think I was not very resilient. And you know how you do those the personality tests, and when you're in people and culture, you do a lot of them by dint of, trialing them out for other people or whatever. Yep. And, always go, I can deal with hard things. And I always go, strongly disagree. So always there would be this reinforcement of the fact that I wasn't resilient, because all of these things just mirrored back to me what I thought about myself. Yep. And then through the process of that sort of 12 months of massive, massive growth, I realized, fuck me, excuse my language, Deborah, but this was a real, it's important to use that word. I am so resilient, and I didn't just survive, I thrived. I absolutely thrived through that time. And I realized that I could do all of this stuff and do it really well, and not just cope, but just, be amazing at life, just win at life, Yep. And so it was a real time of finding myself. And then I started working for myself. And I remember when I was doing my very first projections for my business, I thought, well, maybe I'll earn $500 my first month for my business. I was like, maybe I'll earn that. And then I realized people started paying me for doing what I do and what I love to do.
Yep.
And then I realized, holy shit, I'm actually good at this. I can actually do this for other people and get the same results. And it was interesting as well, because I bet a lot of people recognize this too. When I started out in business, I started doing a lot of things that I thought I should do.
Yep.
Like I tried to emulate other people. And probably for about the first 3 years, I was trying to emulate other people and doing what I thought was the right thing to do. And then after a period of time, I thought, hang on a minute, actually, people want me for me. So I need to lean into my stuff and what I think and my special way of doing things. And so the imposter syndrome got a wake-up call. I realized, and this is one of the biggest realizations in my entire life, that the stories I was telling myself weren't true. They weren't true at all. They were just a load of rubbish. And so these days, when I find myself telling myself a story that gets me away from where I want to go, or that makes me feel bad or diminished, well, hang on a minute, how do I know that that story is true? Because I've had a lot of experience stories like that being untrue. So the imposter syndrome went because I had experienced that myself, that all of those things that people had been saying all of the time that I thought were lies, they were actually telling the truth. And I was like, wow, that's so cool. So I proved to myself that I could do it. And that's how the imposter syndrome went.
Fantastic. That was Act 2, right?
Yeah, so Act 2, that was the beginning of Act 2. And Act 2 saw me have very little to do with Vend.
Right.
Because I had stepped out of the day-to-day operations. I was still a shareholder, so I'd still get the shareholders' reports. But, a lot of the vendors that I knew, a number of them ended up leaving throughout that big restructure. And then more people came on who I didn't know. Yep. So when I went into the office, I wouldn't really know people, which was very strange, really, really odd. And so Act 2 for me was about kind of disconnection.
Yep.
Like I didn't really feel super connected. And it was funny because people would ask me what was going on, and really I wouldn't have any idea about what was going on. But it was really gratifying because when I would go back in, I would see all of those things that I set up in the very early days still going. I was like, wow, this is still here. That's so, and obviously a lot of other great stuff as well. Yep. But no, that was really gratifying. So that was Act 2. We're just not a lot. For me, there was just not a lot of new. I kind of lost myself in the Vend story.
Yep.
Vend continued on without me. And I would have to say I'm very grateful for everyone who looked after it because they did a wonderful job.
Yep.
And then we're into Act 3. And Act 3 is when I get this phone call saying that Vend is going to be acquired by Lightspeed.
Yep. And
all of a sudden, the Vend story gets reignited in my mind. And a bunch of things happen at about that time. So we have Vend's 10th birthday party, and a whole bunch of us old vendors get together with the new vendors and celebrate. We have a few parties celebrating the acquisition by Lightspeed. Vaughan has his leaving do, which I go along to, and a bit of reminiscing and a bit of kind of reclaiming that story. And importantly, reclaiming it for myself, because it's only now, this is the second time I've told this story, it's only now that I'm really figuring out what the story is.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Because it's kind of come to a natural end, I guess, with the acquisition. So it was very much, I was in there, then it continued on without me, then I was involved again, and then sort of coming full circle and understanding what that meant. And in the meantime, I just feel so grateful that in that sort of 6 years or 5 years or whatever, when I wasn't in the day-to-day, that I've just built up this amazing practice that I work in every day, doing the same stuff that I was doing there, but with so many different people in so many different industries and making a difference in so many different people's lives.
Yeah.
So, and I think, so my story is a bit of a wiggly woggly one. And I think that's probably quite normal for most founders. On the outside, it can look quite linear, but in my experience, it really isn't.
I'm quite intrigued because obviously you are all about the human connection. And I mean, when a company grows really quickly like that, as you said, it's different to bootstrapping because you really are experiencing huge amounts of growth. How do you make sure that the culture is maintained? How do you make sure you do get the right people on board? What sort of things did you do, especially when you're going into overseas markets? How do you make sure that you've got people joining who genuinely fit the cultural values and work in addition to the team?
Right. Well, there's a couple of things that are super duper important. Number one, of course, is hiring. Yeah. So you need to be very careful with your hiring and not just hire for culture fit, because then you can get a whole lot of people who are all the same.
Yeah.
But hiring for culture add and trying to get that diversity, but people who share those same values as the organization, who really dig the things that the organization digs, but who don't all look the same. So that's the most important thing, is hiring and not being scared to hire people smarter than you. The second thing I would say is onboarding, because especially with an organization like Vend that did things quite differently, people would come into Vend with very different stories or different experiences of how to work in an organization, especially as it was growing and we were like maybe 150 people plus. So we were kind of larger, but we acted very differently to other organizations of a similar size. So we had a really intensive 2-week onboarding process.
Wow.
Where people would learn about the organization, learn about how we did things, make friends in the organization, learn about the entire ecosystem, learn about customers, learn about the customer perspective, all of this kind of stuff. So it was a real hard and fast introduction to everything to do with Vend. And so we didn't leave them to get this idea of what it was like to work at Vend to osmosis. We managed that really, really carefully. Mm-hmm. And the third thing I would say is leadership is so important. So, and that's why I think development in startups is so important, because when you have your founding team, especially if you are being driven by investment, so you're growing really quickly, it's a bit of a race to try and develop your founding team to the same velocity as the organization is developing. So, for example, let's say you're, chief revenue officer or chief marketing officer or chief product officer or whatever comes on board when you are 30 people, okay?
Yeah.
And then you grow to be 250 people in multiple markets and multiple countries. And this person all of a sudden has a much bigger remit, a much bigger team, having to think much more strategically, deal with large multinational partners. The stakes are considerably higher.
Yeah.
And yet this person has grown with you and they might be a really great cultural fit. However, there's a real risk that they're not going to be able to grow fast enough to be able to do the job competently when the organization is much bigger. Mm. And so if you bring in someone from the outside, then you have all the risks of, are they going to be the good culture fit? What other dynamics are they going to bring into the leadership team? Or you've got, can I grow this person so that they can do this role competently, with mentorship, with coaching, with training, with, education, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so leadership is so important. That saying, the fish stinks from the head. Yep. When I go into an organization that's toxic or in some way horribly broken, I always look to the leadership team, the CEO and the board. Yep. I go, well, what's happening up there? Mm. So that's Yeah, so hiring, onboarding,
Yep.
and leadership are the key ones. And then the other one that's also important is how you pay people and reward people, because you always follow the money. So if people are doing strange things, chances are they're being incentivized for it.
Right.
And you may not realize that it may be an unintended consequence of your incentives program.
Could you give us an example, perhaps, of that?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Okay. So a lot of organizations require teamwork in order to get something done. So then if you are requiring teamwork for people to be able to deliver a great thing to a customer, but then you're incentivizing someone on their individual work, they will put themselves ahead of the team because that's what you're telling them to do through your remuneration incentives, right? So on one hand, you're saying it's all about teamwork, but with your money, you're rewarding the individual.
Yes.
Also, another classic way that you'll see it is that you might reward the sales team for every single sign up that they get, even though that sign up could be a terrible fit to the product that's going to cause big problems for support. And so if you just incentivize sales on revenue in without any idea of how long that person stays around or their net promoter score or anything like that, then you are potentially causing a problem.
Now that makes perfect sense. Excellent. Okay, tell us a little bit about your book, Mel. So, Leadership in the Fourth Age. What?
Well, I actually have 2 books.
Ooh, okay, yes.
Yes. So this is my first one here, Leadership for the Fourth Age, and the Fourth Age is the imagination age, where you have to be very creative, be very imaginative, move super quickly, take risks, work collaboratively in order to get stuff done, because it's beyond the information age, which is just about your head, and it's into the whole body, the head, the heart, soul, the whole knowledge and wisdom that you get from your body as well. And so it's to do, I don't know if you can see this, but I've got this little Venn diagram on my wall because it talks about leadership for the Fourth Age being in the middle of 3 overlapping circles. One is self-mastery. So you need to be able to master yourself. So that you can do what you want to do for the betterment of your future self. The second one is the human connection. So this is all about optimizing those relationships with other people, be it one person or a team of people, because at the end of the day, we're all humans trying to achieve something. And the third one is the environment or the organizational culture. So because if you have your self-mastery of yourself and others, if you have your human connection, but then you are working in an environment that doesn't support those top 2, then it's not going to be sustainable. So those 3 things are all really important. And then the second books that I've written, which are ebooks, are all about on-point conversations. So digging into communication and how to have a really good quality, high stakes conversation, because pretty much everything in business boils down to communication. And a lot of people are scared of those high stakes conversations. Or they just don't have some of the basic skills that you can acquire to make it so much easier for yourself and the other people.
Fantastic. Okay, cool. Hey, I'm conscious of time. We could talk all day, couldn't we?
We could. And we have in the past.
And we have in the past. Right. But that has been absolutely fantastic. It's been really good to hear your Vend story. I hope you tell it a lot more often. I think the tips that you've given people are just, out of this world and absolutely on point. And so if people do want to have a chat to you, because I know you're very open to helping people and sharing your founder experiences and things, how would they get hold of you, Mel?
They could just go to my website, which is www.melrowsell.co.nz. And there's lots of buttons there that says get in touch with Mel. Just push the button and you'll email me, and more than happy to chat to people. Absolutely.
And can they also get the books from that website as well?
Yes, they can. Yes, they can. Yeah.
Hey, Mel, pleasure as always. Thank you very, very much. Look forward to talking again soon.
Yes, my pleasure. Thanks, Deborah.
Thanks again for joining us on Better Business, Better Life with me, your host, Deborah Chantry-Taylor. If you enjoyed what you heard, then please subscribe to this podcast and let us help you to get what you want out of business and life. Each week we release a new short episode which will give a success story and 3 takeouts to put into action immediately. These will help you take your business from good to great. The podcast is also supported by free resources, templates and useful tools which you can find at deborahchantrytaylor.com. I am a trained entrepreneurial leadership and business coach, a professional EOS implementer, and an established business owner myself. I work with established businesses to help them get what they want. Feel free to contact me if you'd like to have a chat about how I might be able to help you, or if you'd like to join me as a guest on this podcast. Thanks again to NZ Audio Editors for producing this podcast. See you on the next episode.